Wednesday morning briefing from Hearts Standard. I am Joel Sked and I'm joined by my colleague James as we. So I just got a message up there. Sorry, I was distracted by a message popping up on my phone there. We are going to use this international break, this period where there's no Hearts games, to look at, assess the 7 summer signings made by the club as I said, in the summer, and to see how they have fit in, to see how they have how they've performed, their impact, and also kind of look forward to maybe what we can expect of them going further down the line into the season. So jumping straight into it, we'll go kind of position to position. Michael McGovern is probably the easiest one to cover because the experienced Northern Irish goalkeeper, he was brought in to replace Ross Stewart to provide more goalkeeping options, essentially, especially with Craig Gordon still coming back from injury. Safe to say that, I mean, the best thing you can say about McGovern so far is the fact that Hearts haven't had to use him. There's not been a injury situation where he has had to be brought in. There was concern at the start of the season pre-season, when Zander Clark picked up an injury and Harry Stone, he came into the team. He performed really well, especially in a friendly with Dunfermline and Athletic, but obviously McGovern's brought in to add more depth to the goalkeeper's position. But again, we've not seen him because Zander Clark has been has performed largely performed well. A couple of errors, but more than anything, has been a very good deputy for Craig Gordon.
Yeah, I think so. Like you say, there's not much we can say about McGovern. You know, he's not played, which makes life difficult. But like you say, I think he's a good profile of goalkeeper to have brought in to be essentially third choice. If Zander Clark were to get an injury or a suspension or something like that, you wouldn't be overly concerned about chucking Michael McGovern in. I don't think he's quite at the same level as Clark or Gordon, but he is like you say, he's a goalkeeper. He's got a good career behind him. He's at a good age. He's got a bit of pedigree, and you know that if he did have to get parachuted in for whatever reason, it wouldn't be a concern. I don't think it'd be a massive concern. So yeah, I think it made sense. You had to, Hearts did need another goalkeeper brought in just in case. We don't know what's going to happen with Gordon's injury still. We need the short-term cover until he does return. And yeah, I think he's done a fine job of warming the bench so far. He's kept that seat nice and warm.
I suppose the one aspect that was a wee bit unsure about was Harry Stone, and it's something I'm probably one of us may need to ask the question to Stephen Naismith at some point, is his potential loan move. There was that was the kind of discussion that because he is not being involved in the B team, it's Liam McFarland's. McFarland's been the number one for the B team and he's done really well. Is that Harry Stone, I believe he's in the final year of his contract, that you would kind of expecting him to go out and get more first team experience. So he's been in the mix of the first team goalies and getting that experience, training with Craig Gordon day in, day out, training with Zander Clark, training with Michael McGovern. 3 guys he can learn so much from. And I wonder if it might just be the case that they're waiting for Craig Gordon to come back. Oh, I've just completely. He's been on loan at Queen of the South. That's it's just completely went over my head that he's been playing at Queen of the South because they had. So yeah, that is a moot point. We'll move on to Frankie Kent. I think it's safe to say he's been the standout summer signing.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that is fair. I know obviously you had your piece up on the site last week, making that point, making that case. And I think when you do run through the list of the summer arrivals, you think he probably has impressed the most. He's also played the most comfortably. He's played every game, right?
Yes, so I think he has he's played the most number of minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
him and Zander Clark, obviously.
Right, yeah, of course, the goalie as well, yeah. So, that alone is a pretty good endorsement, I think, of his impact since arriving.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously part of that's down to the fact that Hearts, Naismith hasn't had a lot of options in defence, due to injuries and elsewhere and whatnot. But Kent has looked very, very solid, I think, since he's come in. There's not really been that many errors. He's been winning. He's been pretty dominant when it comes to winning balls in the air. He's been good when it's when the ball's on the deck and he's trying to challenge a opposition player. And this seems to be a really safe pair of hands. I think he's been a really, really impressive signing, and it's just I think he's I think that basically he's a bit of a leader at the back there. I think he's not the kind of guy who's always shouting and screaming and all that, but he's always happy to kind of organise. You see him during games, like pointing where he wants the ball to go or where opposition players should be. And I think for someone like Rose alongside him, who has definitely got a lot of potential, but is maybe still a bit raw at times, I think having someone like Kent next to him is just a classic no nonsense defender. I think you need that. I think if you're going to have a partnership where one guy's maybe a bit more athletic, a bit more is maybe asked to do a wee bit more on the ball, the other guy needs to just be a big no-nonsense guy. And I think that's exactly what Kent has been. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when Halkett comes back in. Again, we've spoken about this before. You'd imagine it would be Halkett and Kent that would be the first choice pairing at centre-half, if indeed it was a back four. And I think that's a prospect that Hearts fans are quite excited by, is those two playing in the same defence. But then part of me does also go if it's with Halkett. Is it? In American football, they call it like backup quarterback syndrome, where it's just the guy that's not playing, you kind of project onto him. So you're going to go, if Halkett was in the team rather than Rose, then it would be so much better. You kind of project your hopes and dreams onto him, and then you can put him in the team, and you go, actually, maybe we can bigger him up a wee bit too much. So while I think Halkett will improve the team when he comes back into it, there might be a wee bit of that going on as well, where people are just kind of going, he'll get back to his best, no bother at all. And it's like, we all know that football doesn't work like that, not all the time anyway.
I think that's a good point, and it's probably one of the questions get asked the most on any kind of social media, and when it comes to injuries and players, is an update on Craig Halkett when he's back, because there was kind of talk that he'd be back in start of the season, then it got pushed back, and then it's November now. But that's just the nature of a long-term injury. It's hard. That's why I think clubs, managers are so reluctant to put timeframes on injuries, just because things can change within the recovery. Speaking to Craig Gordon, like he had a couple of setbacks just because there's like he had to get stuff taken out of his knee. His knee swollen up because just one injury can then see another part of the body get more strain, and you pick up these niggles. So there's always going to be a case that's going to take time to come back, and I just think Hearts, they saw how important Hearts fans saw how important Craig Halkett was to the defence, and he provided qualities that no one else within the team had. I don't think it was replaced well in January, when it was clear that Hearts needed a physical defender who would take charge and provide the kind of the aerial presence. I think fans will probably need to temper expectation for Halkett just to allow him to get back into his stride. It's just difficult to do because they remember him having performed so well, and the season before he picked up his injury was the best and most consistent he had played in a Hearts jersey. And I suppose, like, bringing that onto Kent is that I think he's been better than expected, but exactly what's been required. You kind of looked at him from down England. The big plus when you looked into him was how many games he's played in his career. He is he sometimes sign players from England where they're in the mid-20s. And they've barely played any first-team football because they've been in a youth academy and they've played under 23 football and had a couple of loans where they might not be regular. Kent was playing basically every single week in whether it's League One or the Championship, and he's played so much football, he's gained so much experience, he's clearly developed. He is probably more of a aerial presence, a positive aerial presence than I thought he would be. He's been excellent I think pretty steady with the ball at his feet. The way he defends, he's not he will go charging out with defence. He's more reactive. He wants to protect the box. He wants to make sure that the teams don't get in behind, and I think that's that's what's been needed. You mentioned his kind of leadership. He's vocal. Yeah, he's not screaming, shouting, and bawling, but he communicates very well, and you can see him, you can hear him on the pitch pointing and directing play, and the fact that he's kind of won over the fans so quickly as well. There was an understanding that is exactly what, as I said, what was required. So yeah, I think he's been probably the biggest success story so far in terms of the 7 recruits. The other defender who was added has been Odell Afaya. It's been, I could say, up and down. A strange start to his Hearts career, just because he came in against Partick Thistle and looked so good, and then he obviously had his situation in training where he took unwell, had to go back to parent club Brighton for checks, and everything was fine, and he's back playing. I look at him, I'm still unsure where he best fits.
So I think he is. I think essentially he was brought in to be an understudy to Atkinson this season. I think that's basically what his role was going to be in the squad. And I think, given that he is ultimately second choice in that position, I think he's been fine so far. Again, I think that, we've touched on it before, the fact that he's been pretty solid enough from a defensive perspective, but he doesn't get forward maybe as much as he could or should. Certainly compared to someone like Atkinson. Even Sibic, when he plays on the right back as well, is more comfortable going forward, I think, than Afaya. So there are definitely areas of his game where he can still improve. I think that he's likely to get quite a fair bit of game time over the next couple of months while Atkinson's still recovering, and that's obviously something that I doubt Naismith had planned for. But basically he's come in to essentially replace Michael Smith in the squad. And I guess that's one of the things that you can notice from this summer is a lot of the kind of older players on the books at Tynecastle were moved on and replaced with younger guys. You look at obviously Gary Mackay-Steven leaving, Michael Smith leaving, Snodgrass as well at the tail end of the last season. So and then you look at the players who have come in, I think, excepting Michael McGovern, Kent's the oldest out of a lot of them. So I think that there was a kind of I think the Naismith did want to kind of rejuvenate the defence, the squad in general, I suppose. And I think that Offia has looked all right so far. He's looked pretty decent. Like I say, you'd want more from in an attacking sense. But I guess he'll get the opportunity to develop that in these coming matches where he is going to be playing because Atkinson is out. I think, like you say as well, against Partick Thistle, he was excellent. It was a great introduction. Obviously, he got a goal as well in that game as well, even from a corner, which is, again, something that Hearts have struggled with this season at various times. So, again, that's nice to know that that's another guy up there who can maybe contribute in those areas where Hearts really have been a bit short so far this season. But yeah, I think the one thing with Afaya is I'd like to see him be a bit more brave on the ball and getting forward, because I think in that game against Partick Thistle, and you can debate about the level of the standard of the opposition all you want, but he was getting forward and he was causing them trouble. So we've seen he can do it. He just needs a bit more encouragement to do it on a more regular basis. So I think that he's looked fairly steady so far, but certainly going forward, we do need to see a wee bit more of him, particularly in the next few weeks where he is going to be relied upon, and we need him to deliver.
He spoke to the Evening News, I think it was after the Ross County game, and he talked about how he is more of when he played wing back, that was a new position for him, because he was more of a right back or centre back, and there was a it's kind of similarity to Alex Cochrane, because when he arrived, he had been on loan, I think it was in Belgium, and he played a lot as a left-sided centre-back in a back three, and then he came in and he was playing either as left back or as a left wing back. I think he adapted to it over time, and probably he's so settled and comfortable in any of those positions. And I do think maybe that's something that might take time for Rafia. And I do wonder, it was interesting on Saturday against Hibs that you wonder if Sibic, having played so well at right back, you might have been tempted to play Rafia as a centre back, because he's played there before, but they obviously switched him. Rafia went to right back, and Hearts lost a bit of the momentum they had, or the kind of bit of their game plan that they had targeted Hibs down the left hand side, with Sibic linking up with Forrest. So yeah, I think there's been positive signs, but definitely the area of room for improvement, if he's continued as a right back or as a wing back, is for that contribution in the attacking phase of play, and just the learning which positions to take up. Because I think that against Ross County, I think that was something that was noticeable. He seemed a wee bit unsure of where he was meant to be, and you saw him be a wee bit deeper, and it was left to Kingsley playing a lot higher on the left hand side.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's something we've touched on before, is the fact that it can get a bit lopsided, I think, with Rafia in the team, where I think we saw it particularly against. We've seen it a few times this season where he's not advancing, the left wing back is advancing, and then all of a sudden Hearts become quite one-dimensional and predictable. And that's something we've talked about a fair bit. But I guess the most important thing to remember is, like you say, he's got to learn these positions. When to go, when to stay. But he's only 20 years old as well. He's a young guy. He's a very young player. I mean, is there any other player in the Hearts squad that's had any sort of significant game time this season that's younger, like apart from Denham? Denham's the only person I can think of who's younger and actually playing regularly. So he's going to take a bit of time to learn these things. It does come with time, and as I say, I think the next month or two, it's going to be pretty big for Rafia, because I reckon he's going to have to play a lot with, because there's essentially only two options at right back now, or right wing back, and they are Rafia and Sibic. So that Hearts are short of options, and he's going to have to step up and start offering a wee bit more going forward, just because Hearts need him to. It's as simple as that.
We'll move into midfield, and we'll look at Callum Nieuwenhof as one of the midfield additions. Came in from Western Sydney Wanderers in the summer, and I think he is someone who is starting to show why Hearts signed him, especially in the last few weeks. I think if you look over the Ross County, the wins over Kilmarnock and Ross County, and the draw with Hibs, he has been one of, if not the most consistent players across those three games. Definitely.
No, yeah. I think you look at those last three games and you think the three players that have really stood out to me, at least, have been, like you say, Nieuwenhof, but also Alan Forrest and Alex Lowry, who obviously we'll come on to talk a wee bit about later on. I think those three have all kind of really seized their chance over the last few matches. But now you're right, because Nieuwenhof, he did get off to a wee bit of a slow start. Obviously, the first game of the season at McDermott Park, he was getting played as a sort of number 10. He didn't look entirely suited to that. He didn't look entirely comfortable. And I think that's I think that was a lesson learned quite quickly by Naismith. I think he is better suited. He is more suited to playing that wee bit deeper. And then it does give you good options as well, where if everyone's fully fit in the midfield, and say Hearts are playing with two in the middle, which they often do, I mean, you've then got three excellent choices to choose between Devlin, Beningame, and Nieuwenhof as well, who they all offer something a wee bit different. But I'd imagine they're the three that will play the most when they're all fully fit. And then with guys like Haring and perhaps Halliday and Denham, probably supplementing them and just giving them a rest here and there where you can. But I think that Nieuwenhof, I mean, one of the things obviously that we've touched on a lot this season already is the fact that that when you look at Hearts' centre mid options, there's not really anyone there that's a good ball carrier. There's not anyone there that's good at taking the ball from deep, advancing a few yards up the park, and then shifting the ball onto a teammate. And I think in Nieuwenhof, particularly in the last three games, he's shown that that's exactly what he can do. So I think that he's been a really strong addition. And I think it took him a wee time to settle. I mean, obviously he had a wee knock as well at one point quite early on at the start of the season that kept him out for a wee while. But I think that he's looked, I think he's got the physicality to do the kind of nuts and bolts of playing in the centre mid in the Scottish Premiership, where it's going to be physical. You're going to have to use your weight and all that kind of stuff. But he's also shown a really good defensive awareness, like off the ball, where I think that particularly in the game against Ross County, you saw there was a couple of times when County managed to get in behind the Hearts defence, and on both occasions when they did over the course of the 90 minutes, it was Neuenhoff that was there to put in a big tackle and halt the attack before it could get going, or before it could develop into something really dangerous. So I think that that really impressed me, the fact that he can fill in, or he can help out defensively as well. And obviously the last few games we've seen him play in that kind of number 6 role, almost at the base of midfield with a couple of players ahead of him, and that does seem to be where he's at his best. I think that there are still a couple of questions hanging over him, though. I think the game against St Mirren away, that showed that he can sometimes struggle to play out from quite an aggressive press high up the park. I don't know if he's got the same kind of composure as someone like Beningame, but at the same time, he's still finding his feet in Scottish football. It does take a while to adapt, but he certainly seems to be doing that, and he seems to be on the right track.
Yeah, it's been he's another one where it's been an interesting time, like beginning to his Hearts career, because he was thrown in against St Johnstone and he played as a number 10, and Naismith admitted that's not his strongest position. I don't think it's a position that we'll see him in again. I thought it was the wrong choice, just because it's not the type of midfielder he is. I don't think he's as strong playing with his back to goal as he is with the game in front of him. And then he had an injury, and it has taken him time to settle again, something that Naismith spoke about. But I've been really impressed with the side of the game that I wasn't expecting to see, like a real strength there, and that's without the ball. I think he's been really, really good at snapping at challenges. He was really good at that on Saturday against Hibs. He uses his body really well, can win the ball back really well. He's ranks behind the Premiership in terms of midfielders for interceptions. You talked about that side of the game at Ross County, where he was covering space, and I think that's partly down to the role he's been asked to play. He's been arguably the deepest of the Hearts midfielders. So second half, Benny was further up than him. He was playing just in front of the defence against Ross County. He was playing in that defensive midfield position, and he's shown the qualities he can to fulfil that role. He does have those he does have the ball carrying qualities you talked about, but I don't think he's done it enough, or not that he's not done it enough. It's that don't think he's been in the position where that's what's required of him. And because he's played in a deeper role when you've had Devlin ahead of him, or Grant ahead of him, or Benny ahead of him, but he has shown in kind of state. He did it against Kilmarnock, for example, where he was really good at just getting the ball, and he's not quick, but he is good with the ball at his feet. He's got really good awareness. He's got a drop of the shoulder which can create space. So as someone just mentioned down here on Facebook, Graham Duthie, was the more games, I don't think he could put it any better, the more games he's playing is the better he's becoming. He's becoming more of a influence in the midfield, and he's a player I'm really excited to see how he develops going ahead.
No, definitely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Graham's made an excellent point now. That's the nail on the head. Yeah, it's just the more games he's played, the better he's looked, and hopefully that continues, and he just continues to improve. And the other thing as well to mention, of course, is the fact that the more that, I would imagine that Neuenhoff and Devlin are probably the two starting centre midfielders at the moment if they're playing with two in the middle. And, that relationship will take time as well. Like central midfielders can be quite a difficult position in order to strike up a relationship with whoever you're alongside. But, I think we saw that even once or twice at the derby, where there was certainly one moment in the first half wherein it looked as if Neuenhoff wasn't sure whether or not to go for the ball. Someone else dallied, and then Hibs player ran in and got it. So little things like that takes just a little bit more time. You can't just wave a magic wand and strike up that relationship instantly. You need to know if when one's going, when one's pressing. All these little things these little tactical things that they do just take time. There's no way around it. The fact that we can't figure out when does Devlin press, when does Neuenhoff press, when did they both press, when did they both set off? These little things, and obviously it changes on a game-to-game basis as well. So I think that, again, it's one of those things where you'd expect him to improve as time wears on, and that relationship they get that greater understanding between them. And I think, you know, the better understanding a midfield pairing have got, then that's obviously going to lead to better performances, or at least you would hope.
And moving on to another player who's also improved, and you talked about him or become more influential and had more of an impact in recent weeks, is Alex Lowry. He has kind of delivered exactly what I was expecting from him in terms of flashes of brilliance, but with the caveat that there's a side to his game that requires improving, and that's something he has spoken about, and that's something that Naismith has talked about as well, in that it's kind of decision making when he's got the ball in certain areas, and decision making and kind of just game focus when he's not got the ball at all. But that's kind of partly why he's on loan at Hearts, is to develop, because we won't get the time at Rangers to develop that. And slowly but surely, I think you're starting to see a player who is coming round to that side of things. He talked about it after the Ross County game, where he was saying that it's not something he had to do when he was younger all that much, or not something he was taught, because he's had the ball so much throughout his whole career at Rangers and youth teams, and he's just been expected to be this creative threat. And he was like, I kind of wish I would worked on that side of the game when I was younger, so I'm not having to do it now. But it's good that he's aware, and I think he's got a really good relationship with Naismith, and Naismith can be not hard on him, but he can tell it to him straight, and I think there's that respect there as well. And I was concerned about him starting against Hibs, just because you've seen players, better players, or more experienced players, I should say, go into an Edinburgh derby and as an attacking threat, and just be lost in what can sometimes just be a really kind of helter-skelter game. He didn't get lost. He managed to play the game to his own pace, which is a hard thing to do, and do it successfully in an Edinburgh derby.
No, definitely, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that a reversal that he played against Hibs, that was probably his most impressive stint. I think we've seen from him since he came into the team.
Other than, as Graham also points out, other than his set pieces, I think even he was getting annoyed with how poor his set pieces were.
Yeah, no, they weren't very good. They weren't very good. You know, they had a nasty habit of taking corners and then just hitting the first man or whatever it might be. You know, that's a very good point from Graham. Yes, those were not good. But from open play, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. You know, the way he was just finding a little bit of space. You know, he's got that excellent vision where he can spot when somebody's making a run, when someone's just found that wee gap, they're getting beyond their man. And, you know, this is what, like you say, this is precisely why Lowry was signed, because he can do that. And I think, like you say, yeah, there's been flashes, but you'd expect that. He's a 21-year-old. He's not played too much men's football. And like you say, so I think that's a really good point. You know, in his youth career, he is playing for a Rangers team where, if you're playing as number 10 for Rangers in youth football, it's like you're not really asked to defend all that much, not really. So yeah, that is a side of his game there is going to, where he is basically doing all this stuff for the first time. Because even in the odd games where he's played for the Rangers, his first team, again, you know, if you're playing for a team that's got, you know, 60-70% possession every week, and you know you're dominating the ball, you don't really have to do as much. So again, that's definitely an area where he needs to improve. But I think, you know, I think to be honest, what we've seen so far is likely what we're likely to see for the rest of the season, where I think there will be spells where he comes into the team and has a run of games where he looks excellent, like the last 3 matches where he has looked really good. But there's going to be other games as well where there will be periods where it's not quite working, he's struggling to get into the game and actually make himself effective. You know, again, because we did see that. He did have a few games where he was either coming off the bench or even got a couple of starts and just struggled to get going. You know, we really struggled to get it going. I think the only exception would be the St Johnstone game again at the start of the season, where, you know, let's not forget, you know, Hearts were really struggling in that game. They were really struggling, and then they brought Lowry on, and that did change the game. That totally changed the game at that point. So I think that I don't know if we're likely to see him play, like, you know, week in, week out at any point really. But certainly he's done himself absolutely no harm over the last few weeks. I don't think he'll be able to sustain that kind of form over the course of an entire season. But I mean, you can certainly see. I mean, Naismith clearly thinks the world of him. I mean, was it after the game at Rugby Park, wasn't it, when he said that he was one of the most exciting young Scottish players he's ever worked with or played alongside? Which you think for someone like Naismith, who's been in and around the Scotland team, playing for big clubs like Everton and Rangers, that's high praise. That's really high praise.
Yeah, it's on the St Johnstone point, and I think his impact at St Johnstone, he'd just been signed and he had barely met the players, and he was thrown into the squad and came off the bench, and his impact at that game, I think, just took the expectation off him even higher and higher from Hearts fans, and I just think that was maybe like a false position, or you just wanted them to. You knew that he'd go through a spell like this where he'd maybe have to be taken out the team, and maybe it would be further down the line. But I kind of disagree. I think he will contribute. Well, I think he will be part of the team week in, week out. But I don't think he'll start week in, week out. But I wouldn't be surprised if he plays 90. He's involved in 95% of the games for the rest of the season, whether it be a start or off the bench, just because he is the type of player that will come off the bench and change a game. That might change if when Barry Mackay comes back, but at the moment there's no one that in the team or in the squad that can replicate the skills, the talent, the promise, the potential, the quality that he has, especially in possession, just the way he can find space, the way he can take the ball and kind of make the game from for the moments he's on the ball, make the game play to his pace, which is really important. And I do think that when Hearts are playing against teams that are going to camp in and we see 65-70% of the ball, he becomes even more important.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we saw that. I think it's the most striking example of that would have been County away. When it was another one of those games where Hearts had a lot of the ball, had made some chances, but nothing major. They were getting a lot of space in the midfield, and Lowry came on and exploited that space brilliantly. Had an excellent assist for Alan Forrest to get the only goal of the game. I think there is still a question as well of where Lowry is at his best, because I would have said
as in left or out left or as a number 10.
Exactly that, yeah. Because I would have said up until the derby, I'd have said that Lowry had probably played his best football for Hearts at left wing, personally. I think that the times where he was playing at number 10, we talked about those run of games earlier in the season where he was playing not really contributing. It was largely playing at number 10 during that run, and I think that I was a wee bit worried that he'd struggle to impose himself in the game in that area, and obviously you don't get a lot of time in the ball often in that space, and I think that he did struggle initially at that point. But then, having said that, at the derby, he was fantastic in that number 10 role when he was doing absolutely everything you could want and more while playing there. So perhaps that is the future. I don't know. But then that's the thing. Obviously, at number 10, the Hearts have got a few options. They've got obviously there's Lowry. There's also George Grant, who's looked pretty good in recent weeks. There's also Liam Boyce as well. So Naismith, and he certainly isn't short of options in that area of the park. Whereas on the left, he maybe is a wee bit shy, particularly with Barry Mackay being out. So I think that certainly while Mackay's out, I think Lowry's probably more likely to feature on the left than anywhere else. But as we've saw at the weekend there, he certainly showed that he can do the number 10 role and do it really well. I guess that might be more to do with the contest itself, the fact it's an Edinburgh derby, it's game's a wee bit more open, it's a bit more end to end. But so again, you wonder about the games against Celtic and Rangers that are coming up. Maybe he is better suited to those kind of games then, where it's not going to be Hearts trying to break down that defence where everyone's sitting deep and try to make life hard. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on, but certainly, certainly the last few games in particular, he's really kicked on, I think, and it'd be great to see him continue that going forward.
Yeah, and he's one of the Hearts players away on international duty. He's with the Scotland 21, so it'll be intriguing to see how he gets on, potentially linking up with Ben Doak, and that's an exciting prospect for Scotland fans everywhere, not just the 21s fans, but in kind of long term. Yeah, short term, I do think that when he's up against stuffy defences off the left might suit him. He might get a wee bit more space and time to get on the ball as he did against Ross County. Moving on to the final two players, we'll go to Kenneth Vargas before we leave Tagawa to the end. Vargas, I think, has been really positive. I think Hearts fans have really liked his attitude, really liked his willingness to get involved, his mentality. You can see it again on Saturday. He does not shirk the physical battle. He had a wee kind of running battle with Lewis Miller, left him in a heap a couple of times, and like that's something I think that's been really encouraging for Hearts fans. The only thing is, again, the caveat, he's still young, still getting used to the league, building relationships, the language, the culture. He's not contributed yet in terms of numbers. We're talking about goals and assists, but so far I've been encouraged, and the hope is that will come eventually.
Yeah, I think that's, again, nail on the head stuff. I think that's the thing. I think that if you watch Vargas, obviously he's played a lot already this season. He's played in most games. He's starting most games. And to be honest, most games he's given a pretty good account of himself. But there is that one thing of, well, so far he's got 10, 11 games under his belt now. And like you say, he's not got numbers. And as someone playing in that area of the park, you need to be getting numbers, essentially. You need to be getting goals, assists, making changing games, essentially. So like you say, hopefully you'd think that would come, but I think that, certainly things like his work rate, you've noticed, like, he does work hard. Even when it comes to tracking back, he's happy to do that. Like you say, he's not going to shy away from the physical battles that you're going to get in Scottish football, which again is really encouraging. And I think that, I think he's got a really good level of technical ability as well. I think that there have been little flashes where you can go, oh no, this guy can really play. Obviously, he almost opened his account for Hearts in absolutely spectacular fashion against Aberdeen when he rattled the bar. I mean, that would have been the contender for goal of the season. Maybe not now that Alan Forrest has shown him how it's done. Yeah. But certainly with Vargas, I think there's definitely a player in there. Like I'm convinced of that. Like you can see that, and you do. I think as well. Obviously, on occasion he's been playing on the left, or he's been partnering Shankland up top and trying to kind of stretch defences. I think his best position's on the right, to be honest. I think that's where I've been most impressed with him. I think that's where he's looked the most dangerous. And I think but then there's Vargas' problem is that's also where Alan Forrest has looked at his best recently. And Alan Forrest has been in excellent form recently, so you can't really shift him out of the team at that stage. So I think that's the problem at the moment. And I think that both Vargas and Forrest, obviously Forrest recently has been playing really well, but I think they both look at their best on the right. And I think that obviously try to squeeze them both in the same team, then you need to shift somebody out. Right now Forrest is in wonderful form, so you need to start him at the right. So I think Vargas, he has been, I think that's one thing to remember though when we talk about the numbers, the fact that he's not getting goals and assists. He has been played in a lot of different positions and has to do a lot of different things, and it does change on a game-by-game basis almost as well. So I think a bit of consistency would help him. Like, getting a sustained run in the team in one role or one position would be helpful. But at the same time, I'm not sure if we're going to see that anytime soon, because we know that Naismith likes to change things on a game-by-game basis. We know he thinks that certain players are particularly suited to certain games, and certain teams or certain formations or systems are suited to certain games. And I think Vargas's versatility has worked against him in this case, because if he was a bit of a one-track pony where he could only play that one area, he probably would be getting a run. But because of the skill set he's got, he can play in a few different positions, or theoretically at least. So you can see why he's getting shifted around. I think what he really needs is just a consistent run, either on the left, on the right, a partner in Shankland up top, whatever it might be. But give him 3, 4, 5 games in one position and then see what happens with that.
I think that could also be applied to the 7th and final summer recruit in Keisuke Tagawa. Graham again makes a good point, and just will eventually take on the Ginnelly role. Obviously can't judge him yet. We can't judge him yet because he's not played too many minutes. Yeah. He is a forward who has largely, when he has played, been the central striker, but he's played both in Portugal and Japan. He's played from the left and been a goal threat from there. And it's one of those where it's just going to be intriguing when Naismith does eventually have his full squad fit. Now, I think as Hearts fans will know, that's not something that managers at Tynecastle tend to get too often, because there's always an injury here or there. Just the nature of it. But he's a player who I've heard is really impressed in training. Which is encouraging, and in the games that we have seen of him so far, he looked like a player who'd arrived in a new style of play and a new culture, and it was just like kind of just feeling his way into it, whereas Vargas kind of just threw himself into the situation. Maybe Tagawa's still just kind of feeling his way in before he got injured. So I think he will have a bigger part to play once we get back after the international break, because he was back on the bench against Hibs.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's been brought into play, and I think that, to be honest, I think in the few kind of appearances he's had off the bench and whatnot, I think he's actually looked quite handy, quite tidy. And I think you can see what he brings to the team. I think, like you say, he's a natural striker, a natural centre forward who has a wee bit more. I think he's got a wee bit more pace, for instance, in Shankland. I wouldn't say he's got the pace of someone like Ginnelly.
To answer Graham's question, I don't think. And if there's one player who could do Ginnelly role, I think it's probably Vargas is probably the one that's likely matches up the most similar in terms of the qualities they have, the speed they have.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree with that. Again, I don't think even Vargas quite has that turn of pace that Ginnelly had. But I'd say he's probably, in terms of profile, he's the most similar to Ginnelly that Hearts have got at the moment. But I do think Tagawa has I do think he'll definitely be able to make an impact at Hearts this season. I think that I mean, that's interesting. I didn't realise that he'd played it on the left before at previous clubs, because again, I look at him and I think that's just a number 9, that guy. I think you can see he's quite he's got that pace where he can just stretch in beyond the defence. I mean, I think we saw that was it the Partick Thistle game where he got his goal. Was it Tagawa? I'm sure it was him. Yeah, he got the fourth, I think, or the third. And again, that was an example. I think what you can see where I think I don't know how he'd deal with the kind of low, deep line defences that we've seen a lot this season. I don't know if he's well suited to that, but I think when the game gets a wee bit more open and a bit more stretched, I think that's the kind of those are the matches where he'll be able to make a real impact, because I think we've seen that at times this season, with Shankland and with Boyce, where they don't quite have that pace in order to really stretch defences and get in behind. Whereas I think Tagawa is someone who can maybe do that. Again, like, he's not super rapid, he's not as fast as Ginnelly, he's not a sprinter, but he is still quick. And I think that's where those are the kind of games where I think we'll expect to see him come in, where it's a wee bit more stretched, a wee bit more open, and there is a bit more space for him to play.
And I suppose the kind of just finishing up just now with Tagawa, with Vargas, with Lowry, Barry Mackay when he gets back, Alan Forrest, and then you talk about Shankland and Boyce and Grant. There's so many options, and then a lot of those options can provide you with a lot of flexibility when playing. The personnel there, that they can switch positions, and then you can see a Hearts attack that could be really fluid. Again, when everyone's fit, when there was relationships are built up.
Because I think that's what Hearts have been missing is, in a lot of games this season, I think the defence has been pretty much fine. I think the midfield's been okay. And then the problem's been in creating those, creating the chances into the final third. It's like, they'll have loads of the ball. The opposition won't be making too many chances, but Hearts aren't getting too many either. And, that's where you need that fluidity. That's where you need guys to, swap positions, whether that be, a striker and a winger swapping over, or, someone dropping deep and someone else pushing on. Those little movements, so that, playing, not being quite so rigid and structured going forward, that's the stuff where, that can really that's where you unlock these teams where look at the games against, like, for instance, Dundee, or the home game against Kilmarnock, or even Motherwell, where it did just look, the way the Hearts were attacking did look very structured, and it wasn't really getting anywhere a lot of the time. Whereas I think if you can, once that fluidity comes, like you say, when you rattle off all those players, you go, all right, that's a pretty impressive, 5, 6, 7 players that can come in, and if they can strike up that relationship, they can be really dangerous. And again, you just wonder, you wonder how long it's going to take for that kind of understanding and that cohesion to develop. Though I think we're starting to see a wee bit more of it. I think particularly again in the derby, we saw that really well. The way that, particularly down the right, all the players on that side of the park, the way they were linking up, they did an excellent job of that. We just need to see that elsewhere in the park as well. It can't just be in one area of the pitch. It needs to be all over. And I think we're slowly seeing that. But again, without sounding like a broken record, that stuff just takes time, and obviously you need all the players fit as well to be practicing and training and all that together.
So yeah, there we go. That was a lengthy Wednesday morning briefing looking at the 7 summer signings so far. I mean, there is there's been good signs, I would say, and overall, in terms of the players who've came in, the club have recruited in areas which were needed. I would argue that I would probably like to see a wee bit more pace in the final third or in the team in general. But when you look at the squad that's been built, there's definitely a lot of variety. There's definitely a lot of options for Stephen Naismith when everyone's fit. But yes, we will see how the players kick on after the international break with some massive matches, starting with Celtic, then a double header against Rangers with a match against Livingston sandwiched in between at Tynecastle. So there will be plenty of opportunities for fans to see the players in action, especially with the likes of Thiago coming back from injury. So yes, be sure to check out everything on heartstandard.co.uk. We have got an interview with Jerry Mallon, the Foundation of Hearts chairman, coming up at midday, and part 2 hopefully coming tomorrow, and there will be much more on the site over the course of the next week, and we will have a question and answer session for the Friday briefing as well. So if you're a subscriber, we might reach out to you to ask for some questions for that. But other than that, thank you very much, and goodbye.